Yes, we are.
Oh, okay, all right. All right. I'm about to go back to my back in the day kind of thing. Well, everybody, thank you for actually being here. This is Omar Lyles from Agape Love Network. Omar Lyles, the mental health coach. And today we're going to talk about how do we experience love? I mean, not how do we experience joy, after a breakup. And we have a wonderful guest here for today. And we have Joy, and she's going to
Yeah.
get ready to introduce herself.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Omar. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. My name is Joy. I am a author, certified life coach, empowerment speaker, and faith blogger. And I published two books. First book is called This Is Not Your Typical Fighting Your Purpose book. And my most recent published book is called Heartbreak Hotel. It's time to check out. And I absolutely love talking all things purpose as it relates to faith, relationships, and purpose. So I'm so happy to be here and talk about experiencing the joy after heartbreaks.
Awesome, awesome. And you know what? It's very wonderful to have you actually on here tonight because it's been a while since we've spoken. But the last time we actually did a live together, we were on Instagram.
Yes,
So
I
I thought that was
remember.
pretty cool. Yeah, yes. I really loved it. I really need to move to Instagram. I don't know what it is. I just haven't really just drilled it in yet. So we
Mhm.
definitely got to do one on Instagram one day as well.
I'm down. Let me
So,
know.
yeah, no, right? So let's get straight into this. All right. How do we experience joy after a breakup? And there's no one better that I would like to speak to on this particular subject than you, because after all, your first name is Joy.
Right?
So one of the things that I would like, one of the questions that I really want to ask you is it normal to experience any kinds of sadness or depression after a breakup? And does everyone experience breakup the same way?
So, to answer your first question, it is absolutely natural to feel any type of sadness, any type of guilt that might come with a breakup, or any type of anger, any type of negative emotions, because I think I feel like it definitely solidifies that what you felt for that person was ultimately real and that it was genuine. And I think sometimes we feel like once we are out of a relationship, or when you're out of a dating relationship, or whatever the case might be, that you are supposed to turn off the human part of you and you're supposed to keep moving forward. And I always feel like if you do not take care of what is in front of you, what is in front of you will eventually actually take care of you in the long run, and take care of, and when you have pain, taking care of you in the long run, it doesn't lead to anything positive. So I always say it's important to allow yourself to feel all the feels. And I remember when I first dealt with like a breakup that really hurt my heart. This was well over 8 years ago. And I remember I was walking during my break and I was on the phone with my cousin. And I was telling my cousin, like, you know what? I was telling him, like, I don't feel like eating. I just feel off. I felt like a part of me was gone. And I remember he shared something that was so profound. He actually shared that, when you're with someone, your entire body is used to that. So once that person is no longer present, you're it's possible for your body to actually respond to that. And what happens is, once we deal with the breakup, we automatically will miss someone and we feel like it's a sign for us to go back. And I always say you need to give yourself that space to allow everything to be purged out, and then from there you make a decision if you want to go back, because a lot of times it's just the emotions and just a shift, it's a change. So it is definitely normal to feel all of the feels. And I forgot what your second question was.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So the second one was, does everyone who experienced breakup, become depressed and everything like that? And yeah, so it was that.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone experiences breakups so differently. I think, I think it depends on one, like with the level or the depth of that relationship plays a role. Two, there's some people who will verbally break up with someone, but they've emotionally broken up with that person months ago in advance. So for me, like when I dealt with my breakup years ago, and this is a breakup in which, I moved from Connecticut all the way to New Jersey for, um I remember hearing people say, girl, like, how are you still like out here like living and you still have hope? And I always tell people it's the grace of God, one, because I really could have and should have lost my mind, but I did not. But I
Mm,
think, with everyone's personalities are different. The same way people show up differently in relationships, I believe it's going to be the same way that people show up with dealing with breakups. However, I do think that even if somebody's showing up dealing with the breakup in a very harmful way, that is not okay. Like, I think with dealing with any breakup, you need to identify what is the limit, that where it's like, okay, no, I need to get external professional help. But all in all, everyone deals with breakups or heartbreaks extremely differently.
and you know what? And I resonate with that so much because I know that me on a more personal level, like when I broke up, with my ex, there was a sense of sadness, and a lot of times people don't like to show it, but on the inside, it sort of like kills you, because sometimes you feel like life is over with at that particular time, and it's really momentarily, and then you have all sorts of feelings, and you feel like life is over, and you don't want to deal
Mhm.
with no relationships anymore. You're like, oh, I don't want to deal with this no more, and
Right.
I ain't talking to nobody.
Yup.
Yeah, so I pretty
Definitely
much
a
got
moment.
into that space.
Definitely a moment. And I think sometimes people feel like, when you talked about how when you broke up with your ex, it was like, oh my gosh, you're sad, and people automatically think, well, I feel sad right away, let me go back. You feel sad immediately, but will you still feel the same way after a year? But I think it has to be a year of you making an effort to heal, and then from your healed self you can make a decision on whether or not this person is actually good for you or not.
Mhm. Mm. Yeah, so what are like the hardest things that people go through when they actually come through a breakup? Well, rather when they go through a breakup, what are some of the hardest things that people deal with?
I think the number one is it takes a hit to your confidence level and your esteem. I think sometimes, like whether you end up being the person actually, that person's breaking up with you, the first thing that comes to your mind is, am I good enough? For a woman, like you might be thinking like, am I beautiful enough? For a man, he might think, I don't, a man may not feel handsome enough. So I think the self-esteem takes a hit. And I think
Mm,
also even the person who is ending something, that can also hit their self-esteem, because you're ending something for a reason. It can be ending it because of the person's not, showing up the way that is not showing up the way that you need them to. The person isn't making effort. You feel like there's a whole bunch of things happening, so you naturally will question yourself. So with the hit of the self-esteem, and then also I think sometimes if we're not careful, there's a fear that ends up being cultivated, and it's the fear of, I'm never dating again, everyone is trash, everyone is a dog, I'm over it, da 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 da. We have to be careful
mhm.
because, you know, you can block your own blessing just based
Yeah.
off of your mouth. The words that you say in your hurtful season can be the very thing that ends up being a hindrance for whatever season you are praying for. So I think it's one of those things, like fear comes about, people are afraid to love again, right? Because
Mhm.
it's a lot of effort that is put in, and then you make an emotional investment. You make an emotional investment, you've made time investment, you probably made monetary investment, right? So it is one of those things where you're like, a person will feel extremely depleted. And then I think another thing is just like, you know being able to move on and move forward and allowing the person to do the same. I think it's always difficult. I think with social media makes it difficult because that person is literally a search away. And if you're not careful, you will find yourself creeping on that person's page, checking their tag photos, checking the comments and pretty much all of that sort. And so it is one of those things where I personally believe in out of sight, out of mind. And you have to
Mm,
do what you have to do, whether it's deleting the person's number, whether it's unfollowing on social media. Do what you have to do, or blocking, whatever you need to do for your sanity. Do that. Me personally, once it's done, it's done. I think I've had situations where I have kind of taken a couple steps back, and I have
mhm.
added these people back on social media because I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe I can try to figure out if we can try this again or whatnot. But currently now I'm just like, no, I don't need to be connected, because if we're not careful, us staying connected to some people will can prevent us from connecting with the person that we probably should be connecting with. So out of sight, out of mind. But it's hard. It's hard, and
Mhm.
especially with social media, and especially on like the IG feeds and stuff like that.
Oh,
That makes
yeah.
it, oh Lord,
Yeah.
it makes it even more difficult. But I
Mhm.
always say, if you have to go to the extreme by blocking, whatever you have to do what you need to do for the sake of your mental health.
Mhm. Yeah, and you know what? Because when you're on social media, is that you'll keep seeing them over and over and over again,
Yeah.
and that I think that reminder will put you in that space again because you start to think about it, and
Yep.
then you're going to start to keep wondering about them, and it's constantly in your head all the time, just constantly drumming, and then you're going to want to you having this kind of thinking to where you want to see them again, so I
Right.
think you're right that you should, at least block, do whatever you can to remove yourself from that space.
Absolutely. And a lot of the times people will say that they miss someone, but no, it's because, to your point, you just saw them on social media. So that's why you miss them. Or people will say, I was dreaming about this person. You was on their page just right before you went to sleep. That's why you probably was dreaming about them. So I think it's like one of those things where, a lot of the times we think we miss someone, but we only miss them whenever we're on their social media pages. But once you turn the phone off, or you put your phone in your bag, leave your phone at home, and you're outside in the world living, you'll start to realize, like, oh, like there's a real world happening, and this person literally isn't in it. And guess what? I'm okay. And I think in breakups, I think a lot of times we think too much. We focus so much on the long term of healing, but in reality, I think we need to focus it a day at a time. Like if you can get through this day, where you're like, I didn't lose my mind, I made it through the day, I did something nice for myself, then it's like, okay, great, check. And then you wait for the next day to see how you conquer that, because it's already
Mhm.
overwhelming for someone emotionally. So imagine already being overwhelmed emotionally from like the with the highs and lows of the emotions that come with a breakup, and then now you're trying to figure out, how am I going to live my day? So I found in my own personal experiences is to just literally take it a day at a time.
Mm, mm. And you know what? I feel for a lot of people who found themselves to where they truly, truly was in love, and it's just hard for them to let go. And that's one of the really, really hardest part when you truly, truly love that person, especially those who've been with that person for many, many years. And I'm not talking about you with someone for a couple of months, but I think that kind of different
Right.
because there are people who may have been in love. They say, "Oh, we've been in love. We were together for three months, and it felt like
Mhm.
forever." I'm talking about people who've been with their spouses for like many, many, many years.
Right. And it makes it a little bit more difficult. But I think also in the healing season, it has to be a space where the person asks themselves, how did I contribute to this? Like, I think sometimes if we're not careful, if we don't make a decision on, okay, yes, this person was crazy, or this person actually didn't treat me right. But we also have to take a moment where we reflect, where we can take accountability of some things. Because if you don't, you're going to find yourself in the same type of dating cycle of the people you're choosing, because who you end up being with is ultimately a choice. A person is going to show you who they are, but you need to make a decision on what you do with that information. You can either continue on and actually start to, work towards a relationship, or you can say, based off of this information that I have, I don't want it. And I think it has to get to that point where people take accountability. And this is why sometimes people find themselves in the same situation over and over and over, because they're, one, not taking accountability, and two, people are afraid to being by themselves because they
Mm-mm.
feel like it makes them look crazy. But the reality is, I always challenge people and I say, you know what? Just wouldn't you want to be single with your peace of mind than to be in a relationship for the sake of a relationship that's ultimately going to end up with your heart being broken? And if your expectations means that in this particular season of your life where you're single, then so be it. Because now the person you end up being in a relationship with, that person already would have proven themselves like, you know what? This is worth the risk of exploring a relationship with this individual. And I think sometimes we treat relationships a little bit too lightly. And I know personally, once I shifted from like being very playful with it to now it's like, no, a relationship is a commitment. I am
Mm.
committing my time. I am committing my finances. I am committing, again, my time. And I need to be very intentional with who deserves it. So I personally, for women, I believe that you need to, like, granted, men will pursue and such. And I think sometimes we make things like dating seem like it's a one-sided thing. Like if a man pursues, the woman has to say yes. Absolutely not. It takes two to tango, not one person. So I think when we take
Mm.
that moment to reflect during the breakup time and all the emotions that come with it, I think that's the perfect time to create a building block on how you will plan to date if you choose to date after.
And you pretty much was transitioning into the next question that I was going to ask is
Perfect.
basically like, and how you will find happiness after a breakup, because a lot of times people have trouble trying to find their place in life again. You know,
Yeah.
after like a divorce, after they've broken up with their fiance or
Hmm.
someone that they truly admires a lot. You know, so how do people get into that space to where they can find joy in their heart and to truly love themselves again?
I think one, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but allowing yourself to feel. I think people do not give themselves the space to feel, and they feel like they have to swallow everything in, and they just have to kind of go about their day. No, you want to. I feel like you have to acknowledge the emotions that come with it, because what happens is you swallow things, it eventually will come out. It's only a
Mm.
matter of time. And I feel like you have to deal with things head on. So I think with the acknowledgement of the emotions, I'm all for therapy, right? I believe in Jesus and therapy.
Mm,
Period.
amen.
Like I think that a lot of the times people feel like they are supposed to wake up overnight and they're supposed to be fine. Granted, there are testimonies in which people have experienced that, but everyone doesn't though. So if that person doesn't, then that means you need to. I personally tell people, like, have you explored therapy? Because just I think people think that just because you let time go by, that you're automatically will be healed. And there's that saying, and
Mm,
I've said it
yeah.
before: time heals all wounds. No, no, no. What you do during that time can heal the wounds. If you do absolutely nothing, it ain't gonna heal it. And some people do a whole bunch of things to actually distract themselves from the healing part. So some people might be like, yeah, I'm just going to travel the world, and I'm going to date again immediately. I'm going to just go back to school. And they're all great things. However, you still need to acknowledge the emotional aspect of things.
Mm,
And I
yeah.
think that's where, whether it's in the form of journaling, I personally think therapy, especially if people have been in long-term relationships, if they've been in toxic relationships, if they've been engaged, if they've been married, you want to do that, because what you don't deal with in this time is going to show up with the next person you end up interacting with.
Yes.
So people who say, especially if you've had like a horrible past with dating, you can tell if somebody's ready for a relationship based off of how they talk about dating, how they talk about the opposite sex, right? Like that's a given. So I know for me as a woman, if I've been in spaces in which, this was years ago, I went out with a guy, and we ended up going on a date. He shared with me that he used to be married, And when he was talking about his ex-wife, because he was already divorced, I told him, I said, I don't think you need to be dating. I said, you need to go to therapy, because here I am. I'm ready. I'm ready to explore this. I'm ready to see if we fit. And this man was bleeding. And
Mm.
that's when I had to tell him, like, I think you need to get therapy. And he ended up doing that. And I think he's in a healthy relationship. So I think that healing part is important. And at that moment, he was single for over 3 years. He was divorced for over 3 years.
Mm.
So I think, doing that. And I think once you get to that foundational work, which is the emotional piece and the faith piece, because if we're not careful, we will blame God for our dating decisions. Because ultimately, God
Mm.
gives us a choice as to who to be with and how long. And if we're honest, a lot of us are with people longer than we needed to be with. A lot of us
Yeah.
had actually ended up being in relationships with people that we had no business being in relationships.
Yes.
Or we ended up marrying people that we had no business marrying, or we were engaged to people we shouldn't have been engaged to, but we said yes for the sake of face. And now we find ourselves dealing with the ultimate consequences. And then from there, we have the audacity to blame God when God gives us free will. So I
Mm.
think it's a matter of healing with that relationship with Christ. And then also, like, just getting back into the word sometimes. Because if you're not careful, you're going to take everyone else's doctrine, and everyone else's doctrine is not helpful. It's actually very toxic. So you have to be really careful. And then once you get to that foundational piece, right? That's the part where you live your full life on purpose, with purpose. That means like traveling. That means, and traveling doesn't have to be international or a luxury. It doesn't have to be you going to like Japan or Thailand. It can be I live in New York. For me, it can be me like hopping on the bus and I can spend a day in Philly, right? Like it can be that, or I might just take a bus. I might spend a day in New Jersey, or whether it's Connecticut. I think it's like really starting to see the world for whatever is offered for what it is. And there's still opportunities. There's, like there's museums, there's shows, and it doesn't only have to be associated with money. So I think living your best life, even staying connected with people that you care about. So
Mm.
if you have really close friends, like start to call them more, hang out with them. If there are broken relationships that you have within your family, or friendships that you think is healthy enough to actually keep, this is the perfect time to fix it. Because what happens is you start to realize that life continues to keep going. And because of that, we sometimes forget, like when a breakup happens, that like I am by myself, I'm on my lonesome self, when it's like, no, you have amazing friends and amazing family members. You just need to make sure that you are staying connected, or you're resolving any
Yes.
issues. But if you don't have friends, it's there are so many apps available where you can go to places and meet friends. So
Hmm.
meeting
Yes.
like-minded individuals and trying new things, and being okay to do things by yourself. I think being able to have fun with you will
Hmm.
allow you to be fun to everybody else. So
Mm.
those are a few things.
Yeah,
I can go on and on about this
I know,
part.
right? You know something? I have fun doing things by myself.
Same.
And I've been rolling for a long time anyway, so it doesn't really like bother me,
Yeah.
because when you're single for a while, you sort of get used to it. But I actually
Yes.
enjoy time by myself. I like going on dinner dates by myself. I like taking nice walks. I haven't been to the theater by myself, maybe once or twice, but it's been a long while. But I enjoy taking time out doing things for myself that makes me happy. One of the things that I really want to get involved into talking about is, where do we see God in all of this? In our life with our breakups, and what do we do when it comes down to that?
That's an amazing question. And the first thing that came to my mind was, God is the only one that will never break our heart. God is the only one that will never, ever break our hearts. Once you receive that kind of revelation, you will realize that your priority should always be God. Even when you're in a relationship, even when you're married, even when you're engaged, even if you're dating or talking to someone, God is the only person that will never fail you. He's the only person that knows exactly 100% how to meet your needs. He knows the depth of your heart. And I think sometimes when we end up being with people, we put God on the back burner. And
Mm-hmm.
it's usually in the midst of breakups is when we're like, okay, God, I need you, because that was me. I'm gonna call a spade a spade. That was definitely me. But I think it's like a reminder that God will never hurt you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's always comforting to know how much or how important it is for us to always invest in our relationship with God. And I think also it kind of makes you really wonder and realize like, okay, God, if I'm dealing with this breakup, like show me the areas in which I missed and I overlooked. When you ask God that, it's going to blow your mind how much you were foolish in the talking stage or in the dating stage, right? Like how blinded we really are. And then I think also even in the breakup part, like once you really give God your heart, and that means submitting to his commands. Like there are certain things that God is very explicit on what he wants singles to do and what he wants singles not to do. It's
Mm-hmm.
the not to do part, which is the part we usually struggle with, and I'm guilty of that. But I think it's one of those things where when you realize it's one for your own good, and two, it will change the way you date, and it will change your taste ultimately, because your breakups are it's going to be painful. But I personally think that, especially if it's a breakup, and it doesn't have to always be toxic, right? Like I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people
Yeah.
can just break up because it's just not the right person. But I think,
Yes.
I think it's important to give God your heart and really allow God to change your taste in men, or allow God to change your taste in women. Um, and because I think we use the scripture with God gives us the desires of our hearts. But correct me if I'm wrong, there's scriptures before that talks about if you spend time with God, he will change your heart's desires.
Mm-hmm.
So that breakup piece, what you do with your time when it comes to God, like if you run away from God, then you're going to always have the same desires of the same type of
Mm-hmm.
person. When you submit to God and you spend time with God, I believe there's a 360 shifting that happens. Some people it's overnight, some people it's a process. For me, it was a process. My taste in men have completely shifted. It has completely changed. It was the things I used to like, I don't like anymore. It's the things that I once found attractive, I don't find attractive anymore. Don't get me wrong, I need to be attracted to the man that, but there are just certain qualities and things that now I look for. But I think it's because of my level of proximity to God. um
Mm-hmm.
and I think in the midst of heartbreak we think God is punishing us, and in reality, as cliche as it is, it's our protection. Like trusting that God sees you as his daughter, or if God sees you as his son, why would he want to withhold anything good from you, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you know something, when I first started doing this, I was really trying to pair couples up, right? So I sort of like not just wanted to pair couples up. What I really, really wanted to do was to help people to figure out where they're at, and any relationships that they get involved with, it would help them sustain in having a successful relationship. So like anybody could pair up with somebody, but once you pair up with them, what are you going to do?
Yep.
Like you're going to need some coaching. You're going to need a referral to may go to a professional counselor or something of that nature. I wanted people to learn to deal with things that are difficult and uncomfortable in relationships. So when you have a breakup, you'll have an outlet. You can be part of a
Mhm.
network of people who have gone through the same things as other people have. So, and that was my thing. And that's why a subject like this is so dear to me, because I know what it's like being on this side of the fence, to where you're in a breakup, and you're going through the emotions, you're going through the stressors, and the pain, and, the sense of not being able to find a connection like you had before, you know, and you come into that space and you're like, man, am I ever going to find someone um, like the individual that I was with, previously? Am I going to be in a long-term relationship again, you start asking those questions, and you
Yeah.
start going into your prayer closet. You start praying to God, about your future spouse and stuff like that. So I was going through a lot of that,
Real.
yeah. And then after that, I started saying, you know what, I'm blessed,
Amen.
and maybe that was a teaching tool to show me and my own personal life and things that I need to do in order to make myself better, to become a better person. So when I get into the next relationship, I will know how to communicate better. I'll be a lot more. I can learn how to be courteous.
Mhm.
I can be prepared to be more spiritually minded and have a sound mind going into that relationship. And so
Yeah.
I think that God's even preparing me to be a much better person. And right now, to tell you, I'm in a really great space right now. And I was telling one of my King brothers, we had that the meeting the other night when we was at Al Hardy's event, you know, um, with the brothers coming together for motivational Mondays, and I was just saying that, you know what, this us men coming together has been the best thing in my whole entire life, because a lot of men haven't been in a lot of spaces where they can get a lot of positive um, influence from other men to help us navigate through life, especially when it comes down to dealing with relationships. Because we talk about all of that, and teaching other men and how to respect women, and when you
Mhm.
get married, you can prepare to do X, Y, and Z, you know. And there are a lot of seasoned men who've been married for many, many years that be there, and, in these spaces, and we're like, wow, this is what I've been looking for. So now you can get a mentor.
Mhm.
It's not an scapegoat from professional counseling, but you at least have somebody that's there. So that's why I think subjects like this is so important, especially for men and women. Because
Yeah.
you represent the ladies.
No
you know
pressure. No pressure.
yeah, I know, right? And not everybody has gone through the same thing, as I have. And some people have left their former relationship, and have not dealt with the issues like I have, And so, but for the most part, I've been fine, and God has made me a better person, and I've been able to um, get through life a lot more better. So now, right now, okay, there's going to be a few questions, because we're going to be ending soon. So one of the questions, well, not a question. I just want you to tell us just a little bit about your book, please. Please tell
Yes.
about your book.
Heartbreak Hotel. It's time to check out. I actually I posted an Instagram post not too long a few months back actually, so it was long ago, about I actually started that book in a journal, and this was immediately following a breakup I dealt with. This was the breakup that happened like over 8 years ago. And as I was writing in my journal, I was like, yeah, I'm venting, and I felt like I had no business giving any type of dating experience or advice. Then after that breakup, I went through a bunch of different cycles. Like I felt like I was outside, I was just not using wisdom with like my choice in men, with dating, with how I dated. I was in a lot of situationships, like it was ridiculous. And I felt like during those past few years, God really was shifting my mindset, although it wasn't always showing up in the form of my choices. But it's interesting how proud pretty much God, how possible God can work in someone even if you don't see it immediately. So just kind of going through life. And I remember after the first book, I was like, okay, God, your girl is done writing. And I remember I really felt like the Holy Spirit was like, yeah, no, you need to pick that book up, and you need to start to talk about how do you get out of the cycles of dealing with heartbreaks, right? Over and over and over. And unfortunately, you cannot stop heartbreaks from ever happening. no matter what. However, you can control the level of, not control, but like, if there's certain things that you can control from actually happening after you deal with a breakup. And I think a lot has to do with kind of having a mirror reflection of yourself and kind of taking that moment, like holding yourself accountable. And I feel like that book is an accountability book. That book is the book in which, I've had to learn a lot of lessons the hard way, unfortunately. And I've
Hmm.
learned, like, okay, if I want to check out of dealing with unnecessary heartbreaks, I'm gonna have to make some changes. And thankfully, I did. Was it a process? Absolutely. But am I in a space where the way I show up with dating or my interaction with men is great? Yes, it's the best it's ever been. Granted, there are moments where I do make foolish mistakes, and it's not foolish in the way how it used to be back then in the extreme, but foolish mistakes in a sense where I might give somebody too much benefit of the doubt for some things, right? But because I'm still a human, not perfect, so I might, especially if it's a talking stage, extend it longer than it needs to, or whatever the case might be. However, there are just certain, I've learned, or I've noticed that when I cut things off because I feel like it no longer serves me, the way I feel after is now empowering because your girl
Mm.
checked out of Heartbreak Hotel. And so this book is just really supposed to encourage singles, whether you're dating or whether you are not.
Mm.
So yeah, and I've gotten some great um I've gotten some great feedback on it, and I'm always astonished when people share like they are applying the things that I've written into their day-to-day lives.
Mm. And I like the theme, the colors, because you
Yes.
went from green and now it's purple, so I really love.
Romantic.
Yeah, yeah, I really love what you did there also. So there's something in the book on page 85, A New Heart. And so it says resetting the heart is a very intimate and important act that requires you to be open, transparent, and vulnerable about your past and current hurts to God. Many times we do not become better when we refuse to deal with the negative dating experiences that have accumulated in our lives. Instead, we become bitter, and that bitterness hardens our hearts to the extent that we do not recognize when we need a new one. And this right here stuck out to me so much. It's sort of like went into what we were talking about earlier. And
Mhm.
so let's tell us a little bit about this, and then we're gonna move on to something else.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the times we ignore our hearts because we want to numb ourselves to the experiences. And I think in order to check out of heartbreak, you need to check your heart, right? Like
Mm.
whenever we're looking at hotels to check in, we do it based off of how we feel, like if it feels good. So if you look at it, if you're on a website looking for hotels, you're gonna look at the hotel and see how the lighting looks or the amenities, and if it feels good, you're gonna check in. But I do think it is one of those things that we have to deal with the heart matter, because if your heart is hardened and you're numb, you are not going to make sound choices on who you choose to date or deal with. Or two, which is a dangerous part, you will not be in anything healthy or
Mm.
fruitful if you don't deal with that. And I
Yeah.
think we always overlook that. But I think it's a matter of being real with God and being like, yo, God, like I've been through some stuff, right? Like
Mm.
my heart feels beat up, and God would not want you out here dating his sons or dating his daughters if you don't get a new heart. And there's scripture, and I think I had added in there where the word of God says that if you ask God to remove your heart of stone, he'll give you a heart of flesh.
Mm.
So when you ask God to remove a heart of stone, it makes you think that it's possible for your heart to be hardened. And once it's hardened, all you got to do is say the word and ask God. And when he gives you a heart of flesh, yes, you're a human. And a heart of flesh means there is blood going through it. It's moving. It's real. Allow yourself to feel. Purge the things out. And I think that gives you, in my opinion, a level-headed mind. So yeah,
Mhm.
you got to deal with the heart. Got to deal with the heart issues.
Awesome, awesome. I love the theme of the book, everything about it. So please,
Thank you.
everybody, go out and get that book. I wish I would have earlier. I wish I would have put a banner on here, to say everybody go and get Heartbreak Hotel.
It's
You
on
know,
Amazon.
yeah, I know, right? So, but when I get off anyway, I'm just gonna put a link to where they can actually get your book on from Amazon or whatever like that, or even to
Awesome.
your site. So people can actually support you and everything like that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're going to get ready to close out. But before we close out, okay, I just want you to give us a 2-minute talk about strengthening your faith and loving who you are after a breakup.
Yes, strengthen your faith, get in the word and find and get connected to a Christian community. It's so important. You cannot do this Christian walk on your own. I think people try to do everything on their own, and in reality, with relationships do matter, and relationships in the form of friendship. So definitely get connected to a Christian community, and then also reading the Word of God. Like I think we are, especially nowadays with Instagram and with TikTok. Everybody has a prophetic word. Everybody has something, but definitely making sure that you read the Bible for yourself. I think it's important. And then also it's in terms of building your confidence, this is the time where you invest in you. And it's not just with the experiences, but investing in yourself as it relates to your inward, but your also outward experience. So this is the time where you take care of the outside part of you. So it can be in the form of, you are wearing things that make you feel good, or wearing things that make you feel confident. If you've always wanted to color your hair, this is the perfect time for you to color your hair. If you want to cut your hair, cut your hair. If you want to go back to the gym, go back to the gym. I think we don't make enough emphasis on taking care of ourselves outwardly by investing our time in doing that. I think we want this, a lot of us want this like microwave um thing, and try to do things the easy route, but it's something about working hard to actually make the external changes that actually matches the internal, that allows you to actually sustain it. So I just feel like take some time to actually do you and to discover who you are. And lastly, be okay with exploring who you are as a person by trying new things by yourself. Solo dolo is great because I think sometimes we don't start things until we're around other folks. But in reality, it's like you learn a whole lot about yourself when you actually spend time by yourself.
All right. Well, thank you, thank you, thank
Thank
you
you.
for that uh last segment where you got the chance to express yourself to everybody else, on pretty much on how to utilize our faith and pretty much just how we can grow as Christians, from being single and stuff like that. So I thank you, for just actually just coming on this platform, even though you're busy, you're doing a lot of things. I take this very hard to the very heart. And that's pretty much it. I thank you for being on. You can hang on just for just a few before we end. So everybody, wait, before we go, tell everybody where they can actually find and locate you.
Yeah, so Instagram is Speak with Joy, or you can check out my website, which is speakwithjoy.net. And on both of those platforms, you have other ways that you can communicate with me from there.